I am Susan Sharp Campbell, the Associate for Educational Ministry for the Presbytery of West Virginia, and this is an overview of the winter stated meeting of the Presbytery to be held Saturday, February 24th at First Presbyterian Church in Huntington. I'll be covering some of the highlights of that meeting from the packet, which can be found at www.wvpresbytery.org. I hope that if you have not already read the materials in the packet, that you will do so before the 24th, when we will gather together in the presence of God's Spirit to be about the work to which God has called us as the Presbytery of West Virginia. As you make plans to attend this meeting, please be aware that packets are no longer being printed unless requested in advance. To have access to the information in the packet during the meeting, you will need to download it in advance to your own device and bring it with you. Wi-Fi will be limited to those making presentations. If you would like a printed packet to be picked up at registration, please contact the Presbytery office prior to noon on Thursday, February 22nd. Upon arrival at the church, you will see signs and people directing you to registration. After picking up your name tag, please feel free to join in a time of fellowship and refreshments until the meeting begins at 10 a.m. You'll find there'll be a lot of presenters during the day, but some of the key people who guide the work of the Presbytery and this meeting are Moderator Amy Parker, a minister member for the Presbytery who serves as the educator pastoral assistant at Village Chapel Presbyterian Church in Charleston, the General Presbyter Ed Thompson, and the stated clerk Maureen Wright. For the remainder of the video, I will follow the agenda, lifting up information that might be helpful as you prepare to attend. After the table of contents on the first page of the packet, on page 2 you will find our mission statement, which guides our work as a presbytery. It affirms that we are called to share Christ's love through mission, ministry, and relationships, the core values of the presbytery. Following the call to order, the host pastor, Skip Seibel, will be invited to bring greetings. This will be followed by our educational focus, which will be led by the leadership team as they seek feedback on priorities for our presbytery for the coming years. Several announcements, including one from Nellie Howard, our Resource Center Director, who also has a display where resources can be looked over and checked out, will then lead us into worship. Worship will be led by Karen Yost and Pat Collier from First Presbyterian Church in Canova, Chris Bailey, our Presbyterian campus minister at Marshall, and Bonnie Boyce, an honorably retired minister. Music will be led by Sandy Folsom and Dale Capehart. Please be aware that all the communion bread will be gluten-free. Following lunch, we'll return and begin with a hymn, followed by the necrology port. This is where we remember those ruling elders and ministers of word and sacrament who have died in the past year and joined the church triumphant. The names of those to be recognized can be found on pages 48 and 49 of the advance packet. This time will be concluded with prayer before we move into the formal business of the presbytery. We will welcome and introduce members who are new to the presbytery or newly laboring within our bounds, but members of other presbyteries, our corresponding members, or visiting the presbytery meeting. Also recognize ruling elders who are attending their first presbytery meeting. This will also be the time to indicate the presence of a quorum. For us, a quorum is 20% of the ministers of word and sacrament members and 20% of our churches represented by a ruling elder. Following the approval of the agenda, the consent agenda will be under consideration. The consent agenda includes items that those planning the meeting anticipate will not generate further discussion. However, if there's an item on the consent agenda that anyone, it only takes one, wants to remove from the consent agenda so that it can be discussed later, it will be removed and come up during the corresponding report later in the meeting. Items on the consent agenda for this meeting include excused absences, approval of communion for the Guys Weekend and Spring Getaway retreats at Bluestone, today's offering to go to the Sensibility Offering and be directed to food pantries, continuing Jay Nunley as an inquirer under the care of Presbytery as he prepares to become a minister of word and sacrament. As an aside, if you're interested, you can find more information in an article about Jay in the Presbytery newsletters of January 25th and February 8th. The consent agenda will also include covenants and renewals of covenants for stated supply pastors, ruling elders commissioned to particular pastoral service, those commonly called CREs, an interim pastor, and lay pastors. This is done because if serving in a pastoral position that is not an installed position, these covenants must be renewed annually. Other items on the consent agenda include moderators in churches without a minister of word and sacrament, as it's the responsibility of the presbytery to provide moderators where there are no installed moderators. And finally, approval for an authorized lay preacher or an ALP to preside at communion. Following the consent agenda, the moderator will appoint temporary clerks, ruling elders, and ministers who will distribute any materials to be handed out during the meeting and count any votes other than voice votes. She will also appoint members of the leadership team who are present to be the standing committee on bills and overtures. This committee would review any new business that was proposed to come before the body and make recommendation. We will then move into the reports of presbytery staff. The written report of the stated clerk, Maureen Wright, can be found on page 4. Please note that the first two items in the information section related to property that has been sold since the last presbytery meeting are lifted up. This action has been taken in light of our presbytery manual, which states that in matters of property which cannot wait until the next scheduled meeting of presbytery, decisions may be made by a committee consisting of the moderator of presbytery and the chair of the leadership team, with the advice of the trustees and the concurrence of the stated clerk, with all such decisions to be reported to the next stated meeting of the presbytery. You will also find in this report information that letters of transfer for members of now dissolved congregations have been sent as requested, in light of presbytery assuming responsibility for transferring membership for those in churches that are dissolved. It is at this point in the meeting that procedural matters will be reviewed. These can be found on page 7. They're divided into 3 parts. First are the principles of parliamentary law. These include courtesy to all, majority rule, one item at a time, respect the rights of the minority, partiality for none, usually pro and con speakers alternate, identifying their positions before they speak, and no one can speak on an item more than once until after all who wish to speak have done so, and then no one can speak more than a second time without special permission. The second part of the procedural matters are the sections of the presbytery's manual that have to do with new business, saying that no new business shall be introduced after lunch without vote on a different deadline, and that any new business shall be presented in written form. This section also explains who has voice and or vote during the meeting. Please review this along with everything else before the meeting. The final section has to do with procedural rules. If you have voice and wish to speak, please go to a microphone to do so. Wait to be recognized by the moderator and then give your name, church name, or other relationship to the presbytery. The presbytery votes to do so by 2/3 of approval of those able to vote. Discussion and debate on each item will be limited to 30 minutes per main motion, with each speaker limited to 3 minutes. Given that the packet is available online, please be prepared to stick to this time frame. Before leaving this section, note that a recommendation from a committee or other entity of the presbytery does not need a motion or a second from the floor, as by implication these have already been reviewed, and the members of the committee believe it should be considered by the presbytery as a whole. On page 8, you'll find the document Motion Basics. Based in Robert's Rules of Order, this is intended to assist in understanding the process we will be following throughout the afternoon as recommendations are brought to the floor. Please note that anyone speaking on the floor of presbytery shall address their comments to the moderator, not to those sitting in the pews or those who have previously spoken. This includes the good news from the pew time as well. Next, Jim Robinson, chair of the negotiating team working with Presbyterian Church of the Covenant, which requested to be dismissed to the Covenant Order of Evangelical Presbyterians last year, will bring in the negotiating team's report. This report consists of background information followed by recommendations based on the presbytery's policy for dismissal. This policy can be found on the presbytery's website under Documents tab and then under the Policy section. You may want to read this document prior to the meeting as well, in addition to the information provided in the packet. The report of the General Presbyter gives you an overview of the work of Ed Thompson, what he has been doing as our General Presbyter, as well as his reflections on his work and the life of the presbytery. He will also be introducing Sarah Speck, the new Bluestone Program Director, to the presbytery. Following Ed's report, Tyler Mayfield, A.B. Rhodes Associate Professor of Old Testament at Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary, will be bringing us greetings from the seminary. We now come to that portion of the agenda largely dedicated to committee reports. These reports are divided into recommendations which must be voted on, and information items about the ongoing work of the committee. Some of the committees have only written reports without recommendations, and these are also found in the back of your packet. The leadership team is bringing a recommendation that an administrative commission be appointed by the moderator to consider how the property that would be vacated by the Presbyterian Church of the Covenant, assuming the previous recommendations are approved, could best be used in service to God's mission. Defined in the Book of Order in G-3.0109, a commission is empowered to consider and conclude matters referred to it by a council. The designated council, in this case the presbytery, shall state specifically the scope of the commission's powers and restrictions on those powers. You may also want to note under the information section for the leadership team that they are working on a new strategic plan, which would have been referred to in the education piece earlier in the day, and a manual revision. The next item isn't a committee report per se, but a report by the moderator-elect on a request from Palo Duro Presbytery for concurrence on an overture to the General Assembly. Periodically, the Presbytery of West Virginia is asked to consider issues known as overtures to the General Assembly, and an overture is an item of business that's been approved by a presbytery or synod that requests the General Assembly to take a particular action or approve or endorse a particular statement or resolution. To be taken up as assembly business, all overtures must receive concurrence from at least one other presbytery. The presbytery's polity on overtures, which can also be found on the website, states that the moderator-elect will review the overture in consultation with representatives from the standing committees to consider whether to bring it to the presbytery for consideration, and if so, will prepare a summary with implications both favorable and unfavorable. This consultation took place earlier this month, and the overture now comes to the presbytery for information. The process for considering this will be as follows. The moderator will summarize the overture, which is found on pages 15 and 16 in the advance packet. The moderator-elect will then review the favorable or unfavorable outcomes found on page 14. And the moderator will then ask if there is a motion to concur with the overture, and if there is such a motion, and a second, and only if that is the case, will there be discussion on the motion and a subsequent vote. Moving on, the report of the Bluestone Committee found on pages 17 and 18 is next. This will be an opportunity to hear more from Sarah Specht about summer camp. The written report also provides information on upcoming presbytery events at Bluestone and an update on the financial and administrative aspects of the camp. The Nurtures Committee's report can be found on page 19 and contains a great deal of information about committee-sponsored events taking place through the first 6 months. In addition, please note that the applications for youth council and scholarships and grants will be sent by email to churches next month, with deadlines at the end of April. Next is a minute for stewardship. The Stewardship Committee seeks to provide training and support to pastor sessions and congregations in the area of stewardship. The recommendations from the Mission Committee report most likely will have been approved on the consent agenda. Their report on page 20 includes information on their work through 2018. Next up is good news from the pews. This is an opportunity for ruling elder commissioners to this meeting, and only those so designated, to share some of the exciting things that are happening in their churches. The intent behind this is that perhaps someone else will hear what another church is doing and find ideas and inspiration in what is shared. If you are your session's ruling elder commissioner and would like to share, please be prepared to do so in a fairly concise manner and direct your remarks to the moderator using the microphone. The Vocations Committee report will focus primarily on the new Authorized Lay Preacher Commissioned Ruling Elder preparation program scheduled to begin in September of this year. In addition, you'll find information on the committee's amendments to repayments of Rachel McClinic loans. The Stewardship Committee's report looks back at our status at the end of 2017, including the budget versus actual spending by committees, a statement of financial position as of December 31st, and a report on benevolence and per capita giving by churches in 2017. The report also looks forward. as pages 33 to 35 provide benevolence pledging and per capita by congregations for 2018. Please look over these pages, particularly with regard to your congregation's information. Is it what you thought it should or would be? If not, check with your session and/or Rocky Poole, our financial administrator. The committee's written report concludes with the year-end information for Bluestone. Most, if not all, of the ministry committee's recommendations will have been approved on the consent agenda, unless removed to be discussed at this point. However, there are 2 additional recommendations they will be presenting. These can be found on page 44 in your packet. The first is to require criminal and financial background checks on all pastoral leaders. The second would require that all pastoral leaders attend a boundary training event every 5 years. Currently, our policy is 1 and done. The committee will be presenting rationale and explanation for these requirements as part of the report. The information section of the Ministry Committee report provides a great deal of information about other items the committee has been working on. The nominating committee continues to call people to serve on presbytery committees. At this meeting, they are bringing 1 nomination to be considered. As always, when nominations come to the presbytery, there's the opportunity for someone to be nominated from the floor. Please be aware, however, that anyone who is nominated must have had agreed to serve prior to being nominated. The administration committee at this meeting has only a written report. It can be found on page 47. Be aware that a written report without an oral report does not mean that the work of the committee is any less important in carrying forth the mission of the presbytery. At this point in the meeting, any new business that was introduced before lunch will be considered. On page 54 in your packet, 52 begins a packet of flyers for a variety of presbytery-sponsored events that will take place before our May meeting. These will be shown as slides at various times throughout breaks in our meeting, but they're provided here for you so that you can share them with your session, with congregational leaders, and others in your congregation who might enjoy taking part in them. Please print and distribute them as appropriate. Since we are no longer printing and sending everything out by mail, your assistance in sharing these is greatly needed and appreciated. They are in chronological order by the date they will be taking place. These flyers include information on Website 101, a workshop to help you design and manage a free website. Evangelism course, which is part of the Expanding Your Ministry Toolbox, to be held on March 16th. Please note the deadline to register for this course is Monday, February 26th. The State of Appalachia Conference, to which Ed Thompson refers in his report, on March 23 and 24. Festival of Faith on April 7th with Jan Edmiston, co-moderator of the General Assembly, as the keynote presenter. Mental Health Issues, another Expanding Your Ministry Toolbox course on April 17th. The Bluestone Guys Weekend with Todd Wright as key leader on April 27 and 29. Bluestone Spring Getaway Retreat, May 4 through 6. The Montreat Youth Conference, June 9 through 16. And finally, Presby Prep information and a registration form, which begins in September 2018. In this packet and at the meeting, you will find a great deal of information shared by committees and others. Ruling elder commissioners and/or ministers of word and sacrament are expected to communicate the work of the presbytery at this meeting at their next session meeting. Please note events and other information that are taking place that you've heard today and share these with your session. We are all connected. One final note. As we gather in councils of the church, including this meeting of the presbytery, we do so in faith that God's Spirit is among us and that our task is to discern the will of God as the Spirit leads us to make decisions. I encourage you to come to the meeting having read the preliminary packet and with an openness to God's Spirit and a willingness to listen. The Spirit is speaking, may be speaking, in the words of those gathered at this time as we join together in worship, prayer, and the work of the presbytery. The meeting will conclude with a charge and benediction by the moderator. Before leaving the facility, please take time to complete the feedback form on page 51. Your response will assist those planning future presbytery meetings. Put these and your name tags in the bags or boxes as you exit. Feedback on this video is also welcome. Just add it to your evaluation or email it to our stated clerk at wvpresbytery.org. Thank you for watching this video. I hope it's been helpful to you as you prepare to join us on February 24th. Thank you. Bye.